Statistics Canada reported just recently that the country experienced 2 consecutive quarters of economic decline, which of course brought up the word recession. So speaking to reporters on his way into a cabinet meeting last week, Prime Minister Mark Carney refused to use the R word. But he did say the data reflects signs of weakness and that cuts to immigration and government spending were among the factors weighing on growth. The connection between immigration and economic growth is not new, but hearing it from the Prime Minister is significant. But where is that leading us? Well, here to give us his thoughts is Donovan. He is a freelance journalist and founder of Dominion Review. Welcome, Riley. Welcome to Bridge City News. Great to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me on.
Okay, so what do you think of Carney publicly linking reduced immigration to slowed economic growth? What are your thoughts there?
Well, look, he's right. But the thing is that it's a startling admission of what skeptics of large-scale immigration have long maintained, which is that having a massive population growth, which we have seen since the pandemic particularly, juices the total GDP numbers and disguises the underlying economic realities, which are that Canada's economy is weak. But when you have this massive growth, it just inflates the total numbers, which looks great on a spreadsheet. And when you dial down into it, you actually see that the standard of living, as measured by GDP per capita, has been declining.
When he spoke to reporters, Carney was careful to frame the reduced immigration targets not as a mistake, but as a deliberate trade-off. So do you believe him?
Well, look, I mean, he has certainly departed in some sense from Justin Trudeau's enthusiastic embrace of mass immigration. Justin Trudeau, of course, as we know, described the country as a post-national state with no core identity. And we saw population growth that reached 1.3 million, which is astonishing in 2023, 700,000 the following year in 2024. Mark Carney has introduced reforms to asylum, limiting that to some degree. He has dialed down slightly the number of students and foreign workers. But I would say fundamentally, he remains committed to the ideal of large-scale immigration. He's just trying to do it in a slightly different way that's more palatable to the public.
And there's been a lot of talk about the pressures increased immigration has put on housing, of course, public services and infrastructure. So you wrote an article, Riley, a couple of years ago about how immigration is fueling a loss of farmland. Can you explain that for us?
Well, sure. I mean, that's just one of these aspects of immigration-driven population growth that is perhaps not commonly known. But we're losing the equivalent of many, many family farms every single day. For every million people we add to the total population, we see hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres of prime farmland near our urban areas that is being lost. And so essentially what's happening is we have a huge country, right? But we can only farm in an intensive, productive way in a very thin strip along the southern border. And so that happens to be where almost all of the population goes. When we have growth, it goes to Vancouver, it goes to Toronto, Southern Ontario, and it also goes to Alberta strongly as well, around Calgary. And we see this push to drive this growth outside of those urban containment areas. And you see massive development and the paving of farmland, which is one of our most important natural resources.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess you'll see a flow of Canadians moving to these smaller places to find affordable real estate. So as this flow drives, is it increasing prices in those smaller cities? I would say yes. And people are, left kind of almost in the same situation that the larger cities are.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, so when you talk about immigration driving Canada's housing crisis, people tend to think of Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto, and I suppose you could say Calgary as well. But there's this secondary, lesser-known effect where the immigration goes into those major urban centers, and then Canadians are driven out of those urban centers. They're seeking a place where they can find affordable housing. And so these floods of Canadians go out of those urban centers into the smaller cities. People go from the smaller cities into the small towns. And so you essentially see this massive population distortion just spreading all over the country. And I think you can see that in essentially every province at this point.
Yeah, and you're right. I think we used to see people moving from towns to small cities to large cities. Now it's kind of going backwards, and now we're seeing these smaller towns and cities having rampant development all of a sudden.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you can see that in my province of BC, for example, you see huge population growth in Vancouver, but then you have a lot of native-born Vancouverites who are trying to find a possibility of having a single family home, if that's at all possible. And so they go to Vancouver Island, they go to Nanaimo, they go to Victoria. But you also see it in Alberta, where people, of course, they might move from Calgary or Edmonton to a place like Lethbridge, or to a place like Red Deer, or to one of the even smaller towns than that. And so you do see this. It's of course the most concentrated in the major cities, but there's almost nowhere in Canada that's immune now.
Yeah, exactly. Even here in Lethbridge, you're seeing people move to smaller places yet, like Coaldale and Colehurst. Riley, as a result of this process, I understand that places are losing, like Ontario, for example, is losing acres of farmland every day. Can you go into that a little bit?
Well, sure. I mean, you see, of course, Ontario, again, that's a big province, right? But where do most of the immigrants go? They don't go to Thunder Bay. They don't go to Northern Ontario. They tend to go to Toronto. They tend to go to essentially Southern Ontario. And as you were saying, people then move from Toronto to the smaller urban centers and smaller towns in Southern Ontario. And so our most valuable farmland is being lost to development. And of course, this is a trade-off that is just necessary to make when you have that scale of growth. It's not like we can choose to not build housing for these people when they come, right? So it's not the fault of the immigrants, but it is the fault of our immigration policy, which is driving this intense growth. And it's necessitating that we play this permanent game of catch-up where every single year we have to build hundreds of thousands of housing units. And not all of those will be multiplexes and apartments in large cities. A lot of those will just be tract development, stretching out into the countryside. And so you do see this urbanization of the countryside.
Yeah, and it's swallowing up farmland. I understand in Manitoba, I think farmland is steadily being eaten up around the fringes of Winnipeg. And I think I had heard that some of the outskirts is swallowing up about 3,000 acres of farmland?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see this just if you go into Winnipeg. You can see that the urban area is steadily expanding outwards. You can see these, and I mean, you have to say these are quite ugly suburban developments. And I mean, this is not necessarily the fault of the developers per se. It's not really the fault of the people building those developments. It's really just the fact that we have to build them so quickly. And when you have to build them so rapidly, you really can't be concerned about aesthetics and beauty and green space and things like that. You just have to build, baby, build. You just have to kick it into overdrive. And so, I mean, you can see this, Winnipeg, absolutely. But in the Maritimes, even you're starting to see it. Alberta, you're really seeing it around Calgary. The city just keeps expanding to essentially absorb more and more small towns. And you can see this all over.
Yeah, exactly. Just immigration just boomed faster than the country could keep up with it. But it looks like the current Liberal immigration strategy appears to be temporarily pulling back a little bit, followed by more sustainable expansion. Is that the right strategy in your view?
No, I don't think it's the right strategy. I think that it's a reflection of the political elite in this country caving to the expressed public opinion in the country, which has turned strongly against immigration. But if you think about it, the total number of permanent residents per year, which of course does not encompass students and foreign workers and asylum seekers, but let's just say permanent residents alone, was going to reach 500,000. It was going to reach 500,000 a year. Now this has been dialed down to 380,000 per year. Okay, that is largely a cosmetic cut at that point. 380,000 is a massive rise even over what we saw in the Harper era, which was about 250,000, slightly less per year. And that in and of itself was already a departure from historic levels. I think what we really need is a real rethink and profound cuts.
Interesting. Riley, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on Tim Hortons announcing that it intends to hire 10,000 local workers in the coming months and then scale back its use of the temporary foreign worker program. So is that a reaction to a high youth unemployment rates, or is that just a PR move, in your opinion?
Well, look, I mean, you can see that Dunkin' Donuts is moving into the country.
Yeah.
And so a lot of Canadians, of course, are saying, okay, well, if Dunkin' Donuts is moving in, then perhaps we will shop there. Perhaps we'll buy our coffee there because maybe they won't be using as many foreign workers as Tim Hortons. And so you have this huge kind of coffee war, this PR marketing battle between these two huge coffee giants. And Tim Hortons has decided to make this kind of overture towards public opinion in the sense that they have said, okay, we will be dialing back our use of the temporary foreign worker program. And they have even promised that they will no longer be lobbying the federal government for expansions to the temporary foreign worker program. However, when you look at their definition of the word local, they say they'll be hiring local. Well, I guess everyone is local to somewhere. And so for them, they say that local includes categories such as international students, asylum seekers, refugees, and so on. And so I would say that this is largely, there's a significant amount of trickery going on there for sure.
Interesting. Riley, before we let you go, one final question about Alberta's October referendum coming up. So one question asks whether respondents support giving Albertans first priority to new employment opportunities. So while another asks whether only those with Alberta-approved immigration status should be eligible for provincially funded social programs. So where do you sit on those types of immigration questions on a referendum ballot?
Well, I think it'll be a very interesting barometer of how Albertans feel, and I predict that those questions in particular will certainly pass, possibly with a very high margin of support. But fundamentally, Alberta does not control the number of temporary residents that come into the country. No province does. Even Quebec, which has been given significant control over immigration, still does not control the number of students and foreign workers, which is what we're talking about with those referendum questions. So, I mean, fundamentally, the question is how many temporary residents total are coming into the country. If Alberta pushes back by cutting off social services to some of those residents, or perhaps charging them a premium, as Danielle Smith has suggested, that may dial down the numbers in Alberta, but fundamentally the problem will still be there. So I think what provinces need to do is instead of demanding more and more immigration, which traditionally has been what provincial governments have done, caving to the business lobby, business interests within their province, I think that they need to stand up and ask Ottawa, demand from Ottawa, a strong reduction in the total numbers.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that provinces should have more of a say in the number of immigrants that come to their province?
Well, I think it's complicated because we expect that if they were given more of a say, then they would use that to reduce the total numbers. But what we saw with Premier Smith in the past was that she used to support this idea of doubling the Albertan population from 5 to 10 million. In recent months and in the last year, she has changed her tune, and I respect her for that. She has definitely aligned her opinion on immigration with the wider public. But I think no matter who controls immigration, whether it's the provincial government or the federal government, you have this intense business lobby pressure, which influences all of them. And so essentially, no matter who controls it, whether it's provincial or federal, the most important thing is whether the Canadian people are in control of it. And so that means that the voices of Canadians should be stronger than the voices of the entrenched immigration lobby in our country.
Riley Donovan is a freelance journalist and founder of Dominion Review. Riley, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.